I'm Mandy Fitzsimmons. I'm your Washington REALTORS Legal Hotline lawyer. And today's one-on-one is once again with Ms. Pili Meyer.
Thank you.
The discussion of the buyer agency agreement has always been important, but it has taken on an all-new meaning with the evolution of our industry really over the last couple of years, and even more poignantly in the last few weeks and months. Would you agree?
Yes.
So because Pili is particularly qualified and eloquent at discussing the buyer agency agreement and humble, we were asked Pili to join us for this one-on-one presentation to explain to you, the viewers, number one, the philosophy that she has regarding the value of the buyer agency agreement, and then to present in a role-play setting how she has developed over the course of her, how many years were you selling real estate?
32.
32 years of selling real estate. The process that she developed as being very effective in introducing the concept of a buyer agency agreement to a buyer. So we're going to do those first two things in two videos. Today we're going to talk about your philosophy on how the buyer agency agreement brings value to the relationship between a buyer and a buyer broker. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. So when I started in real estate, we were all representatives of the seller. We were sub-agents of the seller if we were not the listing agent. And the mantra was, you are the eyes and ears of the seller. Everything the buyer said to you while you were in the car driving around or while they were looking at the house you were showing them, you told to the listing agent. That was the way it worked then. Then we changed the law, and I was on the agency task force that wrote the new law that identifies how you represent a buyer as well as how you represent a seller and the agency duties and so on. And so there was a shift, and I was privileged to teach buyer agency classes right after it came out because nobody knew what to do. And it was a real deer in the headlights moment for a lot of agents when they sat down to talk to the buyer. The buyer started telling them all these secrets, and the agent's like, am I still the eyes and the ears or not? And that evolved over time in my mind because I had the benefit of teaching these classes and listening to the questions. That evolved over time in my mind to think about the relationship that you have with this buyer client and what you can do and all the different services you can provide them that you never were able to provide them before because you only represented the seller. Okay. So that was a big mental leap for me. And so then I started using the buyer's agreement because I was talking about it in classes, and I thought, it's kind of no integrity if you're telling people how to do this and you don't even use it in your own practice. So I started, and the first 3 times they said no, one less politely than the other 2. And there was no way to go back. You know, it was like, okay, well, shaking hands, have a wonderful time, because I said, this is how I run my business, and they said, no, thank you. If I said, but for you, I'll make an exception, they couldn't trust me. So I figured I had to get better at doing this. And that meant looking at the relationship, and when do you ask for this agreement? So you can't do that up front. You can't say, oh, okay, let's get your name and your phone number and your contact information. How best do you want me to contact you? And oh, by the way, here's a contract to sign. That's just way too in their face. And it disrespects them because you have not learned anything about them, and they have learned precious little about you. And you're saying, but I'm trying to get you to hire me, so do it now. No, they really need to know more first. So this evolved into a multi-step process. And really it came out of the ABR classes I taught. As we worked through doing this, we had role plays and so on. And I had the privilege of watching many, many role plays, some of them significantly better than others. And I came up with, I synthesized all of that. And the first step, after you've sat down and said your hello and contact information and whatnot, is tell me what you want. Why are you here? Not just what kind of real estate do you want, but why? What are you trying to accomplish? What is the real life situation you're trying to solve with real estate?
So you're getting at the emotion of the buyer. You're reaching for an underpinning that establishes a quality relationship with them rather than just a contractual relationship.
Right. Just like at the beginning of a listing presentation, I would say there are 3 things that are important to a seller: best price, shortest time, least inconvenience. And then one day, just for no reason at all, I said, which is the most important to you? And it was a revelation. They both thought it was a husband and wife, and they came up with different answers. Now that was information that was valuable to me, because I knew for him, best price was important. So as I was suggesting different things to do to get their house ready for market, and this will get you the best price. And for her, it was shortest time, because he was going to go to some godforsaken place and start working, and she was left behind until the house sold. She wanted to get going. So this will help you get a fast sale. And just apply that to the buyers. What problem are they trying to solve? And that's important. So this could be the longest part. And then, of course, they tell you what kind of real estate they're looking for. And here's another fun thing. They say 3 beds, 2 baths, and a view. 1 level. 3 beds, 2 baths, 1 level, and a view. And it is so tempting to turn towards your computer and start drawing up everything that fits that narrow criteria. They've given you a price range. And when you're done with that, you should turn back to them and say, and do you want fries with that? Because you're just taking an order. You don't know enough yet. Why 1 level? There are 2 of you, you're empty nesters, why 3 bedrooms? And if you can get more of that information, it's better. So that's a long period. Once you've done that, you move to the next step, which is, this is what I will do to help you get it. And I can't tell them about my customer service until I know what they want. Because if it's an investor, I'm going to stress how I have a very sharp pencil and a really fast calculator, and I study the market trends and all of that. If it's a first-time buyer, I'm going to verbally put my arms around them and show them how I'm going to care for them through this transaction. If it's a first-time seller, we don't talk about first-time sellers very often. They've been through real estate chapter 1 by buying, and maybe their parents helped them, advised them, they had advisors, but now they're like grown-ups, and they think, well, we should be able to do this without our parents telling us what to do, but they really don't know how to sell a house. So they need special care. And so you emphasize, I like to think of it as cherry picking. You have all these different customer services that you have in your cherry tree, and you pick out the ones that are particularly significant for the person across the table from you. Because it's not about you, it's about the person across the table from you. Always, never forget that, most important. This is also the section where you talk about your agency duties. And I know a lot of brokers shrink from that. I don't want to talk about agency. But you know what? That's the way most of us feel. So nobody's doing it. And if you suddenly explain to them confidentiality and loyalty and all these different aspects of our agency duties, they're going to see how you really are on their side. And you really are going to do the best for them. So I think that's very important. Then there's the step that most people don't take, because it's called, this is what I expect of you. And we pull back from telling them that's what they have to do. And in my book, it's really simple. Get pre-approved for a loan if you're getting a loan, because I don't want to be in the business of breaking hearts. And if I show you houses you can't ever afford to buy, or show you houses that are below your affordability range and you don't want to live in those dumps, that doesn't work. So let's find out what you can actually buy.
And I would say in today's world, they actually need to commit to go get underwriting pre-approval. Not just a pre-approval letter, but underwriting pre-approval letter. But that's a different video, so go ahead.
But that does help with this whole thing. I understand the market, and in today's market, this is what you need to do, etc. Okay, and then you may, if you've done a really good job on this is what I'll do for you, and you've rolled out all your great customer service, you may get the question, and who pays for this, early on? And sometimes you can say, I'm going to get to that, but sometimes that feels like a stall. So go ahead and talk about it right away as soon as it comes up. I used to be able to say, I think this is hands down the best deal for buyers anywhere, because you don't actually have to pay anything extra for my services 99% of the time. And let me explain how the commission works. So I talked about the MLS and the selling office commission, and sometimes that fee is insufficient to meet my fee. And only in those instances would you be asked to make up the difference. And I had one gentleman say to me, well, how much would that be? And here's where we screw up, and I used to do this all the time. You mistake a question for clarification as an objection. He wasn't objecting to having to pay. He just wanted to know how much he would have to pay. And he signed the buyer's agreement and agreed to pay the difference. So we invent rejection in our heads before it's ever on the other side of the table.
Okay.
So
As an industry, I think we've invented rejection regarding a request for a buyer agency agreement.
yeah. So let me add to that. I cannot believe that the only people who will willingly sign one of these agreements comes to my desk in Port Angeles, Washington. Because if I want you to work with me, if I want to work with you, and I present it this way effectively, and it could take 15, 20 minutes to go through all of this, you're going to sign. Because I presented to you a fantastic deal. I'm going to do all these services for you. I'm going to monitor the market. I'll send you ways to monitor the market. If you see anything out there, this is how you contact me, so I look it up and I get information about it. But I don't just stop with, this is how I get paid. There is one last, you have to cross that bridge to the paperwork. And I used to say, or I still sometimes said, everything we do in real estate is in writing, and this is no exception. But I had a young couple with me one day, and I said, you know, there's a lot of paperwork in this business, so let's get started. And I really love that. It's the action step. Hey, we've done all this talking, but let's go, you know. And so then you pull out the contract. The beauty of it is, you already know where the landmines are in a buyer's agreement. And you talked about that when you said, and this is what I'll do for you. You've covered some of the agency landmines or whatever. So when you get to those paragraphs, you know, remember when I was talking about this? As we discussed, and you had some questions about this, but I think we covered it, don't you? Do you have any other questions? And so you're reviewing all of your previous discussion. I have prepared you to be able to sign this agreement.
Beautiful. I think that that's probably as much as we ought to cover in today's video.
Okay.
Your philosophy on, or I would call this more than philosophy, I would call this the pathway, the roadmap to introducing the topic of the buyer agency agreement to the buyer.
Yeah.
I think in some respects we've already started the role play that I envisioned for the next video.
But I do want to add something. I had someone of a younger generation ask a question in a class that says, this is great when you're sitting in the office or at Starbucks or someplace like that, but we usually start over the internet. And I'm like, you know, there's no reason you can't do it in a house that you're showing. Just take an extra few minutes. And frankly, I don't know why anybody's showing a house without having part of this conversation with the buyer, because don't we owe the sellers a little due diligence in making sure that we only bring people to see their house who can afford to buy their house? And so we're not getting them all excited about, oh, I had another buyer. And no, but they're not really a buyer for you. So somewhere along the line, you have to sit down, eyeball to eyeball. And you know what? You could do it using FaceTime. That would work.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that's a tool that we are not making use of in our business. That I hear people say all the time, well, you know, it's all over the internet, I email, blah, blah, blah. But FaceTime is a great tool to use. And then electronic eyeball to eyeball, but
Right.
they can see you and you can see them. And you can see when they're confused about what you're saying and so
Okay,
on.
fair enough. Okay, so let's call it for today.
Okay.
We'll be back next Friday. Until then, I'm Annie Fitzsimmons.
And I'm Pili Meyer.
If you would like to ask questions about what Pili's discussed so far, unfortunately, you're going to have to direct the questions to me because Pili's not taking questions any longer, but I'll try to get the answer from Pili and get back to you. Or on any other topic, send an email to me, legalhotline@warealtor.org. Thank you for being a Washington REALTORS member.